my pillow?
No. She can't. Okay. Stop. Stop. Saturday morning about 8, Kit and Nita and Fred took the bus down to the Long Island Railroad station and caught a shiny silver train for Manhattan. The train was full of the usual cargo of Saturday travelers and shoppers, none of whom paid any particular attention to the boy and girl sitting by one window, going over the odd contents of their backpacks with great care. Also apparently unnoticed was a faint spark of white light hanging in the center of the window between the two, gazing out in fascination at the backyards and parking lots and stores the train passed. What are all those dead hunks of metal there, all piled up? Cars, Fred. I thought cars moved. They did, once. They all went there to die? They were dead when they got there, probably. But they've all climbed on top of each other. When they were dead? No, Fred, they have machines. What was that? There are 3, I don't know what those were, but they have them shut up in a box hanging from that long thing. No one you know, Fred. That was a traffic light. It was emitting. Look, he's trying to say something. Hello? Hello? Fred, you're flashing. Calm down or someone will see you. Well, I don't know what a nice guy like him was doing in a place like that. Nita sighed out loud. Where were we? She said to Kit. The battery. Right. Well, here it is. Lithium cadmium? Right. Heavy thing. It weighs more than anything else we've got. That's the last thing for activating the piece of time, isn't it? One more. The 8½ sugar cubes. Okay. Nita held up a little plastic bag. Okay. Now the world gate stuff. The pine cone. Bristol cone pine. Nita held it up, then dropped it in her backpack. The aspirin. Uh-huh. The fork. Here. The rowan branch. Yup. She held it up. Cut down and peeled, it was about a foot long. A greenish-white wand. Great. Then we're set. You've got all that other stuff. Why don't you give me the battery? Here. Nita handed it to him. Watched as he found a good spot for it in his backpack under the sandwiches. What's that? She said, spotting something that hadn't been accounted for in the equipment tally. Huh? Oh, this. He reached in and brought out a slim piece of metal like a slender rod with a small knob at one end and broken off jaggedly at the other. What is it? A piece of junk. A busted-off car antenna. Well, Kit amended it was, anyway. I was sitting out behind the garage yesterday afternoon reading, and I started talking to my dad's old car. He has this ancient Edsel. He's always talking about getting it reconditioned, but I don't think he's really going to. There's never enough money. Anyway, he goes out every now and then to work on the engine, usually when he's tired or mad about something. I don't know if he ever really gets any work done, but he always comes inside greasy all over and feeling a lot better. But I was going over the spells in my head, and the car spoke to me in the speech. Out loud? No, inside, like Fred does. Kind of a grindy noise, like its voice needed a lube job. I wasn't too surprised. That kind of thing has been happening since I picked the book up. First it was rocks, and then things started to talk to me when I picked them up. They would tell me where they'd been and who'd handled them. Anyway, the car and I started talking. Kit paused, looking a touch guilty. They don't see things the way we do. We made them, and they don't understand why most of the time we make things and then just let them wear out and throw them away afterward. Nita nodded, wondering briefly whether the train was alive too. Certainly it was as complex as a car. What about this antenna thing, though? She said after a moment. Oh, the car said to take it for luck. It was just lying there on the ground, rusting. Dad replaced the antenna a long time ago, so I took it inside and cleaned it up, and there are some wizardries you can do with metal to remind it of the different forces it felt when it was being made. I did a couple of those, partly just practicing, partly... You thought there might be trouble, Nita said. Kit looked at her, surprised. I don't know, he said. I'm going to be careful anyway. Carl was pretty definite about not messing around with the world gate. I wasn't thinking about anything like that, but it occurred to me that it'd be easy to carry the antenna to school if I wanted to. And if anyone started bothering me... He shrugged and then laughed. Well, that's their problem. Hey, look, we're getting close to that big curve where you can see the city before you go under the river. Come on, these trains have a window in the very front of the first car. Fred, want to see where we're going? Why not? Maybe I'll understand it better than where we've been. Kit and Nita wriggled into their backpacks and made their way up through a couple cars, hanging on carefully as they crossed the chained walkways between them. Treetops and housetops flashed by in a rush of wind and clatter of rails. Each time Nita touched the bare metal of the outside of the train, she jumped a little, feeling something, She wasn't quite sure what. The train, she thought, thinking. And now that I'm aware that it does, I can feel it a little, though not as clearly as the trees. Maybe my specialty is going to be things that grow, and Kit's is going to be things that run. But how many other kinds of life are there that I could learn to feel? Who knows where thought is hiding? They went into the first car and made their way up to the front window, carefully hanging onto the seats of oblivious riders to keep the swaying of the train from knocking them over. There were no more stops between there and Penn Station, and the train was plunging along, the rails roaring beneath it. Those rails climbed gradually as the already elevated track went higher still to avoid a triple-stacked freeway. Then the rails bent away to the left in a long, graceful curve, still climbing slightly, and little by little, over the brown cityscape of Brooklyn, the towers of Manhattan rose glittering in the early sunlight. Gray and crystal for the Empire State Building, silver blue for the odd sheared-off Citibank Building, silver gold for the twin square pillars of the World Trade Center, and steely white fire for the scalloped tower of the Chrysler Building as it caught the sun. The place looked magical enough in the bright morning. Nita grinned to herself, looking at the view and realizing that there was magic there, that forests of towers opened onto other worlds. One day she would open that world gate by herself and go somewhere. Fred stared at the towers, amazed. This is more life? More even than the place where you two live? 10 million lives in that city, Fred. Maybe 4 or 5 million on the island alone. Doesn't it worry you? Packing all that life together? What if a meteor hits it? What if there's a star flare? If something should happen to all that life? How terrible. Nita laughed to herself. It doesn't seem to worry them. Beside her, Kit was hanging onto a seat, being rocked back and forth by the train's speed.
Also, the likelihood of that happening is 0%.
Very faintly, Nita could hear what Kit heard, and felt more strongly. The train's aliveness. Its wild, rushing joy at doing what it was made to do. Its dangerous pleasure in its speed. The wind it fought with, the rails it rode. Nita shook her head in happy wonder. And I wanted to see the life on other planets. There's more life in this world than I expected. It's beautiful, Fred said from his vantage point just above Kit's shoulder. It really is, Nita said, very quiet. The train howled defiant joy and plunged into the darkness under the river. Penn Station was thick with people when they got there, but even so, it took them only a few minutes to get down to the 7th Avenue subway station and from there up to Times Square and the shuttle to Grand Central. The shuttle ride was short and crowded. Nita and Kit and Fred were packed tight together in a corner where they braced themselves against walls and seats and other people while the train shouted along through the echoing underground darkness. I can't feel the sun, Fred said, sounding worried. We're 10 or 20 feet underground, Nita said silently. We'll get you some sun as soon as we get off. Kit looked at Fred with concern. You've been twitchy ever since we went into the tunnel, haven't you? Fred didn't speak for a moment. I miss the openness, he said then. But worse, I miss the feeling of your star on me. Where I come from, no one is sealed away from the surrounding emissions. He trailed off, his thoughts full of the strange hiss and crackle of interstellar radiation, subtly patterned sound, rushing and dying away and swelling up again. The speech in yet another of its forms. Star song, Nita thought. You said you heard about the Book of Night with Moon, she said. Was that how? Your friends, your people, they actually talk to each other over all those distances. Millions of light years. That's right. Not that we use light to do it, of course, but the words, the song, they never stop. Except now. I can hardly hear anything but neutrinos. Kit and Nita glanced at each other. The world gate is underground, Fred, Kit said. In back of a deli, a little store. We'll have to be there for at least a few minutes to get Nita's pen out. We could go out first and look around, Nita said. We're early. It's only 9:30. We don't even have to think about anchoring the time slide for a little bit yet. The subway cars screeched to a halt. Doors rolled open and the crush loosened as people piled out. Nita got off gladly, looking around for directional signs to point the way toward the concourse level of Grand Central. It had been a while since she'd been there. Are you sure you know your way around this place, Kit said, as Nita headed down one torn-up-looking corridor. Uh-huh. They're always doing construction in here. Come on. She led them up a flight of stairs into the lower Grand Central Concourse. All beige tiles, gray floor, signs pointing to 50 different trains and small stores packed together. "The deli's down there," she said as she went, waving a hand at a crowd of hurrying people in the wide hall past them. "We go up here." And another flight of stairs, wider and prettier, led them out on the upper concourse, a huge stretch of cream-colored marble under a great blue dome painted with constellations and starred with lights. They headed across the marble floor, up a short ramp, and out one of the many brassy yellow doors onto the street. Immediately, all three of them were assailed by noise. Exhaust fumes, people hurrying in all directions, a flood of cabs and buses and cars. But there was also sunlight, and Kit and Nita stood against the wall by the Grand Central doors, letting Fred soak it up and get his composure back. He did so totally oblivious to the 6 men and 3 jackhammers working just across the street behind a barrier of sawhorses and orange plastic cones. "That's much better," he said. "It was quieter inside, though," Kit said, and Nita was inclined to agree with him. The rattling clamor of the jackhammers was climbing down her ears into her bones and making her teeth jitter. The men, 2 burly ones and 1 skinny one, all 3 broad-shouldered and tan, all in helmets and jeans and boots, appeared to be trying to dig to China. One of them hopped down into the excavation for a moment to check its progress and vanished up to his neck. Then the hammering started again. "How can they stand it?" Nita muttered. "Stand what? It's lovely out here." Fred danced about a little in the air, brightening out of invisibility for a few moments and looking like a long-lived remnant of a fireworks display. "Fred, put it out," Kit said, "if somebody sees you." "They didn't see me in the field the other day," Fred replied, "though Artificer knows they looked." Probably the Learjet distracted them. "Fred, come on, tone it down a little," Nita said. "Let's go back inside and do what we have to do. Then we can set the time slide and have fun in the city for the rest of the day." They went back inside and down the stairs again, accompanied by the quiet inward sound of Fred's grumbling. There was no trouble finding the little deli where the World Gate was situated, and Nita and Kit paused outside it. "You have everything ready?" Nita said. "All in here." Kit tapped his head. "The spells are all set except for 1 or 2 syllables. It's like dialing almost all of a phone number. When I call for you, just come on back. All we need is for the supplies to be in range of the spell. There's nothing special that has to be done with them. Fred, you stay with Nita." "As you say." They went in. Nita lingered by the front counter, staring at dill pickles and sandwich makings, trying to look normal while she waited for Kit to call her. Fred hung over her shoulder, looking with great interest at bologna and salami and mayonnaise and cream cheese. "You people certainly have enough ways to internalize energy," he said. "Is there really that much difference between one brand of matter and another?" "Well, wasn't there any difference when you were a black hole? Didn't a rock, say, taste different from a ray of light when you soaked one or the other up?" "Now that you mention it, yes, but appreciating differences like that was something you had to work at a long time. I wouldn't expect someone as young as you to—" "Nita," Kit's thought came abruptly, "we got trouble. It's not here." "What? It has to be." "It's gone, Nita." "Girlie," said the man behind the deli counter in a no-nonsense growl, "you gonna buy anything?" Nita said, and by reflex more than anything else picked up a can of soda from the nearby cooler and fished around in her pocket for the change. "Kit," she called. "Coming?" She paid for the soda. Kit joined her, carrying a small bag of potato chips, which he paid for in turn. Together they went back out into the corridor, and Kit knelt down by the window of a store across the way, a window full of shiny cutlery. He got his wizard's manual out of his pack and began going through the pages in a hurry. "I don't get it," he said. "I even checked this morning to make sure there hadn't been any change in the World Gate status. It says right here, patent and operative. Were the spells all right?" Kit glared up at Nita, and she was instantly sorry she'd asked. "The spells were fine," Kit said, "but they got caught like the first one I did when you came along." "Oh, damn." He trailed off, and Nita edged around beside him to look at the page. "Something's changed," Kit said. And indeed, the page didn't look as it had when Nita had checked it herself in her own manual the night before. The listings for the other Manhattan World Gates were the same. The World Trade Center gate was still listed as under construction, and the Rockefeller gate as closed for routine maintenance. But under the Grand Central gate listing was a small red box that said in bold typeface, "Claudication temporarily dislocated due to unscheduled spatial interruption," followed by a string of numbers and symbols in the speech, a description of the gate's new location. Kit glanced up at the roof, through which the sound of jackhammers could plainly be heard. "The construction," he said. "It must have screwed up the World Gate's interruption of space somehow." Nita was puzzling over the symbols for the new location. Isn't that term there the one for height above the ground, she asked. Uh-huh. Look at it. It must be 60, 70 stories straight up from here. Kit slapped the book shut in a great annoyance, shoved it back in his backpack. Now what do we do? We go back outside? Fred said, very hopefully. It seemed the best suggestion. The three of them walked out again, and Fred bobbed and danced some more in the sunlight while Nita and Kit walked slowly eastward along 42nd Street toward the Park Avenue overpass. Dislocated, Kit muttered, and who knows how long it'll take to come undislocated. A perfectly good piece of time wasted. Nita stopped and turned, looking up into the air and trying to estimate where the deli lay under the Grand Central Complex. She picked a spot that seemed about right, let her eye travel up, 60, maybe 70 stories. Kit! She said, Kit! Look what's 70 stories high and right next door. Kit looked. Dark blue and silver with its big stylized globe logo on one side, the Pan Am building reared its oblong self up at least 70 stories high. Right there. Not only right behind Grand Central, but part of it. Yeah, Kit said, his voice still heavy with annoyance. So you remember that shield spell you showed me? The one that makes the air solid? If you change the quantities in the spell a little, you can use it for something else. To walk on even. You just keep the air hard. She couldn't keep from grinning. Kit stared at Nita as if she'd gone crazy. Are you suggesting that we walk out to the World Gate and... He laughed. How are we going to get up there? There's a heliport on top of the building, Nita said promptly. They don't use it for big helicopters anymore, but the little ones still land, and there's an elevator in the building that goes right to the top. There's a restaurant up there, too. My father had lunch with someone up there once. I bet we could do it. Kit stared at her. If you tuck the air solid, you're going to walk on it first. I saw that spell. It's not that easy. I practiced it some. Come on, Kit. You want to waste the time slide? It's almost 10 now. It'll probably be years before these guys are finished digging. Let's do it. They'll never let us up there, Kit said with conviction. Oh, yes, they will. They won't have a choice because Fred'll make a diversion for us. We don't even need anything as big as Learjet this time. How about it, Fred? Fred looked at them reluctantly. I must admit, I have been feeling an urge to burp. Kit still looked uncertain. And when we get up there, he said, all those stories up and looking as if we're walking on nothing. What if somebody sees us? Nita laughed. Who are they going to tell? And who's going to believe them? Kit nodded and then began to grin slowly, too. Yeah, he said. Yeah! Let's go. It's getting late. Back they went into Grand Central, straight across the main concourse. This time, and up one of the 6 escalators that led up to the lobby of the Pan Am building. They paused just outside the revolving doors at the end of the escalators. The Pan Am lobby was a big place, pillared and walled and paved in dark granite, echoing with the sound of people hurrying in and out of the station. I can't read when you stick your face in front of the page. They went up the escalator to the next floor, and Nita pointed off to one side, indicating an elevator bank. One elevator had a sign standing by it, Copter Club, Helipad Level, Express. Also standing by it was a bored-looking uniformed security guard. That's it, Nita said. So if we can just get him away from there. It's not that simple. She pointed down at the end of the hall between 2 more banks of elevators. Another guard sat behind a large semicircular desk, watching a row of TV monitors. They've got cameras all over the place. We've got to get that guy out of there, too. Fred, if you're going to do something, do it right between them, out in front of that desk. Well, Fred said, sounding interested, let's see.
Yes, please. Just burp out something humongous.
He damped his light down and floated off toward the elevators, nearly invisible unless you were looking for him, and even then looking like an unusually large speck of dust, nothing more. The dust mote stopped just between the desk and the elevator guard, hung in midair, and concentrated so fiercely that Nita and Kit could both feel it 30 feet away. Bang! That'll get their attention, Kit muttered. It did. Both the guards started at the noise, began looking around for the source of it. Then both went very, very slowly over to examine the large barrel cactus in a brass pot that had suddenly appeared in the middle of the shiny floor. What? Now, Kit said, and took off toward the elevator with Nita close behind. Both the guards had their backs turned, and Nita, passing them, saw the elevator keys hanging off one guard's belt. Fred, she said hurriedly, can you grab those real fast the way you grabbed my pen? Don't swallow them. Once I might make that mistake, Fred said, but not twice. As they slipped into the elevator, Fred paused by the guard's belt, and the keys vanished without so much as a jingle. He sailed into them. How was that? Great. Quick, Nita, close the door. She punched one of the elevator buttons and the door slid shut. The keys appeared again, and Kit caught them in midair before they fell. It's always one of these rounded ones like they use on coin phones, he said, going through the keys. Fred, I didn't know you could make live things. I didn't know either, Fred said, sounding unsettled, and I'm not sure I like it. Here we go, Kit said, and put one key into the elevator lock, turning it to run, and then pressed the button marked 73, Restaurant Helipad. The elevator took off in a hurry.
Can you pause it?
It was one of the high-speed sort. Nita swallowed repeatedly to pop her ears. Aren't you going to have to change the spells a little to compensate for the gate being up high now, she said after a moment. A little. You just put in the new height coordinate. Oops! The elevator began to slow down quickly, and Nita's stomach churned for a moment. She and Kit both pressed themselves against the side of the elevator so they wouldn't be immediately visible to anyone who might happen to be standing right outside the door. But when the door slid open, no one was there. They peered out and saw a long carpeted corridor with a plate glass door at one end. Through it could be seen tables and chairs, and more dimly, through a window, a hazy view of the east side skyline. A muffled sound of plates and silverware being handed came down the hall to them. Stop. It's early for lunch, Nita said, relieved. Let's go before someone sees us. What about these keys? Look, let's leave them in the elevator lock. That way the guard downstairs will just think he left them there. If they discover they're missing, they'll start looking for whoever took them, and this would be the first place they'd look. Yeah, but how are we going to get down? We'll walk on air, Kit said, his voice teasing. Nita rolled her eyes at the ceiling. Or we'll go down with the people coming out from lunch if that doesn't work. Let's just get out of here first, okay? Which way do we go to get up to the heliport? Left. There are stairs. They slipped out of the elevator just as it chimed and its door shut again. Probably the guard had called it from downstairs. The corridor off to the left was featureless except for one door at its very end. Helipad access, the door said in large red letters. Nita tried the knob, then let her hand fall in exasperation. Locked. Crud. Well, wait a moment, Kit said, and tried the knob himself. You don't really want to be locked, do you? He said aloud in the speech, very quietly. Again, Nita was amazed by how natural the wizard's language sounded when you heard it, and how nice it was to hear. As if, after being lost in a foreign country for a long time, someone should suddenly speak warmly to you in English. You've been locked for a couple of days now, Kit went on, his voice friendly and persuasive, not casting a spell, just talking. Though in the speech the two were often dangerously close. It must be pretty dull being locked. No one using you, no one paying any attention. Now we need to use you at least a couple times this morning, so we thought we'd ask. Ka-tick, said the lock, and the knob turned in Kit's hand. Thank you, he said. We'll be back later. He went through the door to the stairwell, Nita and Fred following, and as the door swung to behind them, it locked itself again. There was a decidedly friendly sound to the click. Kit grinned triumphantly at Nita as they climbed the stairs. How about that? Not bad, Nita said, determined to learn how to do it herself, if possible. You've been practicing, too. Not really. Some of this stuff just seems to come naturally as you work with it more. My mother locked herself out of the car at the supermarket last week, and I was pulling on the car door and talking at it. You know how you do when you're trying to get something to work. And then it worked. I almost fell over. The door came open so fast. It's the speech that does it, I think. Everything loves to hear it. Remember what Carl said, though. I know. I won't overdo it. You think we ought to call him later, let him know what happened to the gate? They came to the top of the stairs, paused before the next closed door, breathing hard from the exertion of climbing the stairs fast. Probably he knows if he's looked at his book this morning, Nita said. Look, before we do anything else, let's set the time slide. This is a good place for it. We're out of sight. When we're tired of running around the city, we can just activate it and we'll be back here at 11:15. Then we just go downstairs into Grand Central and downstairs to the shuttle and then home in time for lunch. Sounds good. They began rummaging in their backpacks and before too long had produced the 8½ sugar cubes, the lithium-cadmium battery, a fat one, bigger than a D-cell and far heavier, a specific integrated circuit chip salvaged from the innards of a dead pocket calculator, and the handle of a broken glass teacup. You might want to back away a little, Fred, so your admissions don't interfere with the spell, Kit said. Right. Fred retreated high up into one ceiling corner of the stairwell, flaring bright with interest. There was a brief smell of burning as he accidentally vaporized a cobweb. All right, Kit said, thumbing through his manual to a page marked with a bit of ripped-up newspaper. Here we go. "This is a time-slide inauguration," he said aloud in the speech. "Claudication type Mesara Gimel Vivink 6, authorization group." Nita swallowed, feeling the strangeness set in as it had during their first spell together, feeling the walls lean in to listen. But it was not a silence that fell this time. As Kit spoke, she became aware of a roaring away at the edges of her hearing and a blurring at the limits of her vision. I asked you to stop that. Both effects grew and strengthened to the overwhelming point almost before she realized what was happening. And then it was too late. She was seeing and hearing everything that would happen for miles and miles around at 11:15, as if the building were transparent, as if she had eyes that could pierce stone and ears that could hear a leaf fall blocks away. The words and thoughts of a million minds poured down on her in a roaring onslaught like a wave crashing down on a swimmer, and she was washed away, helpless. Too many sights, commonplace and strange, glad and frightening, jostled and crowded all around her, and squeezing her eyes shut made no difference. The sights were in her mind. "I'll go crazy! I'll go crazy! Stop it!" But she was caught in the spell and couldn't budge. "Stop it! Oh, let it stop!" It stopped. She was staring at the floor between her and Kit as she had been doing when the flood of feeling swept over her. Everything was the same as it had been except that the sugar was gone. Kit was looking at her in concern. "You all right?" he said. "You look a little green." Yeah." Nita rubbed her head, which ached slightly as if with the memory of a very loud sound. "What happened to the sugar?" "It went away. That means the spell took." Kit began gathering up the rest of the materials and stowing them. He looked at her again. "Are you sure you're okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." She got up, looked around restlessly. "Come on, let's go." Kit got up too, shrugging into his backpack. "Yeah, which way is the—" Crack! Went something against the door outside, and Nita's insides constricted. She and Kit both threw themselves against the wall behind the door, where they would be hidden if it opened. For a few seconds, neither of them dared to breathe. Nothing happened. "What was that?" Kit asked. "I don't know. Sounded like a shot." "Lord, Kit, what if there's somebody up here with a gun or something?" "What's a gun?" Fred said.
Gun.
"You don't want to know," Kit said. "Then again, if there was somebody out there with a gun, I doubt they could hurt you. Fred, would you go out there and have a quick look around? See who's there?" "Why not?" Fred floated down from the ceiling, looked the door over, put his light out, and slipped through the keyhole. For a little while there was silence, broken only by the faint faraway rattle of a helicopter going by, blocks away. Then the lock glowed a little from inside, and Fred popped back in. "I don't see anyone out there," he said. Kit looked at Nita. "Then what made that noise?" She was as puzzled as he was. She shrugged. "Well, if Fred says there's nothing out there, I suppose. But let's keep our eyes open." Kit coaxed the door open as he had the first one, and the three of them stepped cautiously out onto the roof. Most of it was occupied by the helipad proper, the long, white expanse of bare tarmac ornamented with its big yellow square and H symbol, and surrounded by blue low-intensity landing lights. At one end of the oblong pad was a small glass-walled building decorated with the Pan Am logo, a distended orange windsock, and an anemometer, its three little cups spinning energetically in the brisk morning wind. Beyond the helipad, the roof was gravelled, with various low-set ventilator stacks poked up here and there. A yard-high guardrail edged the roof. Rising up on all sides was Manhattan, a stony forest of buildings in all shapes and heights. To the west glimmered the Hudson River and the Palisades of the New Jersey side. On the other side of the building lay the East River in Brooklyn and Queens, veiled in mists and pinkish smoke.